Well, awesome. Thank you everyone for sitting through the pre-recorded presentation bit. We've got some really good questions in the chat, so I'm going to start in on those. However, before I get to that, I just wanted to say we also have, not to call you out, Dayon, but we have Dayon Woods on the call as well. As I'm answering these, Dayon, if you have any additional perspective or color you want to add based on what you've seen in monitoring, please feel free to jump in. So we're going to go through these questions. It looks like the first one that, well, this wasn't included in the chat, but this is something that's come up recently, so I wanted to touch on this before we get into the other questions. When do we need to notify OWD of new board members? And so I just wanted to clarify that the only time that you need to let us know that you have new board members is when you have a new board chair. Obviously, unless it's part of your required action for a finding that you get about board members throughout the rest of the year, we only need an update about your board chair. And that needs to happen within 10 business days of them being elected. This is detailed in the state policy manual at section 1.7.1. But you can simply send me an email, let me know who the new person is, and we'll need their contact information because board chairs are one of the contacts that we include on our master local area contact sheet. So we just kind of keep a record of that. And if you could also send the board minutes that document the election, that's all we need. As you have other board members onboarded, that's something we'll evaluate and monitoring to make sure you have, your conflict of interest and everything squared away there. So board chair's the only time. The second thing I wanted to address, someone asked me actually in an email while we were on this call, what's the status of the executive order that made it possible for local boards to conduct virtual meetings? And I do want to apologize. I lapsed a little bit over the holidays in sending out that information to you all, but the state of emergency for the public health situation is still in effect. Governor Kemp has it scheduled to expire on February 7th. But as you're all aware, they've been updating those kind of the day or two before it expires. So I'll keep an eye out for that and I will let you guys know. And I'll continue to send those emails. So again, I apologize for falling behind on those. Now we're going to move into the questions that were in the chat. And this one wasn't a question, but I did want to acknowledge the note that Carol put in here. She made a really good point that there is usually a local board or a board chair board track at SETA. So there are a ton of great resources available there. And then also, is it the National Association of Workforce Boards? They have great resources as well. So if you're ever looking for more information, those are great places to check. And then additionally, Workforce GPS, which is USDOL's training arm, there are a plethora of training sessions about local board operations. So that's another place that I recommend everyone check when you've got board questions. To be honest, when you all send me questions, that's usually the first place that I check. So they've got a lot of great information there. All right, so the first question in the chat was, could you please clarify providing employment opportunities with regard to chamber employees sitting on a business seat? They asked, is that assisting with in-demand jobs and announcements or actually hiring personnel in those in-demand occupations? So it's the former. What enables chamber employees to serve in that position is that, they're really plugged into the needs of businesses in their area. So, while they may not be hiring for those positions, they can, ascertain what positions are open, what are potential workforce needs. They can still advise, on that part of their member businesses, what they're experiencing. Again, maybe a director of business engagement would be able to speak on behalf of all their member organizations and say, hey, these are the issues we're running into. These are career pathways we need to consider. And be able to provide information like that. The next question was, so when we're talking about notice and posting requirements, does the meeting summary need to remain posted once the final minutes are approved? And the answer is no. So that summary is really kind of a stand-in because, as you know, the full minutes are not going to be available until they're approved by the board, which could be a couple months from the board meeting. So that summary piece just needs to stay up until the full minutes are available. And then the same information would be included in your meeting minutes. So you're good there. Then I believe, let's see, Brett asked, can we get the definition of quorum in writing? And yes, so most of what I covered on those slides is currently included in our local board resource guide. However, given the questions that came up today, I'm going to update that and repost it to the website, and I'll resend it out to everyone. And I'll make sure that everything I covered, in this presentation is also included there so that you've got it in writing. Next question. Are we permitted to accept conflicts of interest submitted to state, county, or city office of ethics? Say the member is also an elected official, instead of having them complete and sign the ones issued by TCSG? No, because the conflict of interest is included in your bylaws. I've got the state rules and regulations pulled up here. They need to sign the board specific one. Really they need to sign that acknowledging what their specific roles and responsibilities are under the local workforce board, which includes the conflict of interest. So they have to submit that one. Alexis just sent one that's related to that. Can you confirm that the conflict of interest is not annual and only needs to be completed upon placement on the board? And yes, the requirements in the rules here, and I believe it's included in our WIG on this, which again, I'll send that out after this. Yes, they are only required to sign it upon their appointment to the board. They don't need to re-sign it every year. The next question was, so in terms of if a member needs to miss a meeting, someone asked, can you explain what does prior to the meeting mean? Can that be hours ahead, or does it need to be within a certain time frame? And from the state perspective, we don't set a timeline. Obviously things like illness or something that's coming up last minute could happen on any timeline, so we don't set a requirement there. I would recommend looking at your bylaws. If you've set up a process for notifying the chair or anyone that the member needs to miss a meeting, just make sure that you don't have a super strict timeline in there. But no, there's not any specific timeline required by the state or the federal regs around this. The next question is, okay, so again, related to missing a meeting, does the notification for missing a meeting have to go to the chair, or can it go to an administrative assistant? And it's perfectly fine for it to go to an administrative assistant. That's how we handle our state board. Everything runs through NIA. I do highly recommend sharing that information with your chair, even if they're not the one monitoring those emails. Just because your board chair may be in a better position to kind of address with a member that's having an attendance issue, like being able to encourage them to attend. And honestly, I kind of recommend having the board chair have that conversation first, just in terms of like the hierarchy of board members and board chair. It could get a little awkward for you to bring it up unless you have a good relationship with them. So just something to keep in mind. The next question was about onboarding. Someone said, does onboarding have to take place one-on-one with new members, or can it be a part of a meeting agenda? I would say in a perfect world, yes, it would be great if you could have a one-on-one sit down or phone call with new members to kind of go over that material, onboard them, answer any questions. But obviously, time is not always or time is an issue there, so that may not be possible. So at least it's important to send that individual member any onboarding materials, sending them the information about who to contact with questions, and kind of going over some of the higher points of like attendance and how to call in or anything like that is important. But there's no requirement about how it has to take place, just as long as it works for your board and your members are getting the information that they need is really what's important. If you want to do it as like a presentation in your board meeting, I think some areas may do that as an annual thing. That's certainly encouraged as well. So those are all the ones that came in during the meeting. Let me scroll through here and make sure there's not more. Oh, here's another one. Do you recommend that the local board nominating the new board members first and then sending their recommendation to the LEO for formal approval? Some areas not involved with the board. Hang on, sorry, let me. Latonia, I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself. I'm not sure that I am understanding the question. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Hi, no problem, Brittany. Thanks. Okay, and I'm sorry about the typo. I was texting and chatting
No
at the
worries.
same time. So the concern that we have is the question is some workforce areas do not involve their local workforce board when nominating or appointing new board members. Mm-hmm. And the law certainly says that the LEOs are the one that actually approves. What we typically do is that we, involve the board, say that this person is coming on why, and then we send that recommendation to the LEO board. But because of some scheduling conflicts, we need some board vacancies filled, we may have to go straight to the LEO first, the LEO board. So I was just wondering, what's the recommendation?
Yeah. So I think that's something it's going to be dependent on your local area, which I know is not the most helpful answer. I think running it through your board and kind of going through with your existing members, if they know anyone else who's willing to serve or who they think would have a good perspective, I think that's always helpful. Obviously it is up to the LEOs, but as most of you know, like some areas, the LEO board doesn't meet that often, or they're not as involved as we would like them to be. So I think having that added perspective from your local board to say, hey, we think this person would fit well with our group and have a good perspective to offer, I would say yes, I encourage that, but it's just going to depend on what your your setup is in your area and how involved your LEO board may or may not be.
Right. And the second part of that question, Brittany, was Chamber of Commerce and their involvement in appointing. I think I read somewhere in a reg that the Chamber of Commerce should help appoint private sector members.
Yeah, so they can be consulted to kind of recommend, again, because they're like plugged into the business or the private sector in your area. They may be able to know who of their like member businesses would be involved. So yes, that's definitely recommended to have the chamber kind of give those nominations or recommend who they think, would be a good fit for the board.
Great, thank you. This has been a really good presentation. Thank you.
Good, I'm glad it's helpful. And again, I'll make sure that all of this is included in the resource guide. There's a couple more questions that I'll cover, but again, if you have questions at any point, y'all are welcome to email me. We'll keep that resource guide updated. And again, this is a topic we come back to every year. So as you run into new issues or the same issues keep coming up and you want more guidance, please feel free to reach out and we'll make sure that we're covering it. Let's see. Someone else asked, when you do the annual review, are you only looking for new conflict of interest forms, i.e. new members, or reviewing all conflict of interest forms again for that time frame? I'm going to hand this one over to Dan. Dan, would you mind taking this question?
We look at all of them just to make sure, even if you had older members, we check those. We check any new people that come in. We check all of them. If they're on your board, we're going to make sure that they have a conflict of interest form, because then we'll also cross-reference it to make sure that if we don't see a conflict of interest form, that they're not voting on any matters either.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan.